Over 50 years ago, record executive Dave Kapp signed a brilliant young musician to his label. While the handsome pianist's style was inviting and his technique flawless, the name Louis Wirtz had to go. Dave wanted something that sounded very American, so he came up with Roger Williams, after the guy who founded Rhode Island. Well, the name Roger Williams really worked. He sold millions and millions and millions of albums. He has more platinum records than you can count, but at one time he was actually thrown out of the Drake Conservatory of Music.
I always liked popular music, and this was a very strict music school. And one day I was playing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes in the practice room, and the head of the piano department walked in, caught me playing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and promptly threw me out of the school. Said he wouldn't teach me anymore, and he advised that I withdraw, which I did.
Actually, as a youngster, his first instrument was not the piano.
My grandfather had a clothing store. And in those days, you gave away something with everything that was bought. He sold shirts for $1, men's shirts for $1, and they gave away harmonicas with every shirt that you bought. And somehow there always ended up a few more harmonicas than shirts. And I started playing the harmonica. And I remember the first tune I ever played. It was I Come From Alabama with a harmonica on my knee. And Granddad taught me that little tune. And pretty soon I was out playing him before I knew it. I really enjoyed the harmonica. In fact, I played it all the way through high school.
Roger, in 1952, you realized a lifelong dream when you entered New York's Juilliard School of Music.
And I had an awful lot of doors slammed in my face. I think I came very close to having a nervous breakdown in New York because, in the first place, I'd see a great many pianists who I thought I could play rings around in the big rooms in New York. And I couldn't get in. I couldn't break in. I couldn't break into the union. They wouldn't even let me in the union wing. I finally had a chance at a job at the Forest Hills Inn. I hadn't had any work for 3 months. The day before I was scheduled to go in, they called up and told me that the boss had changed his mind and hired someone else. And that was about the lowest point of my whole life. The guy that he hired was an alcoholic. He came in and worked a half a week, and he was fired on a Thursday night. So the boss called up and he said, "Hey, I'll take that piano player you got for 3 days until I can get someone else Monday." And I went in there for 3 days and lasted for a little over 3 years.
What was your initial introduction to the piano?
My dad had a church. My dad's a preacher. And some people gave the church a player piano. And somehow it found its way into our home. I don't know how it got over there, but it did. And so I used to sit at the player piano and pump the keys. In fact, I made little checks on them when we first started, and I'd try and memorize the tunes after I play them on the player piano. My uncle took me to my first lesson, and I remember the first song I ever played. It was Little Fishy in the Pool, Do You Find the Water Cool? Well, that kind of chokes you up, doesn't it?
That's not to be confused with Three Little Fishies and an Itty Bitty Poo, is it?
No, that was a little later. That was about 1933, as I remember. Being a preacher's kid, why, again, I was exposed to a great many musical instruments because people in the church, whenever their kids would get tired of a flute or a trumpet or drums or anything else, then they'd donate them to the church. And whenever an instrument came in, why, I'd play it. I'd learn to play it. So by the time I was 12, why, I had learned about 13 different instruments.
To anybody learning to play the piano, they will almost always tell you it's a chore to practice. Your mom had a good way of getting you to sit down and do your practicing.
When I'd get home from school, she was a very good cook, and she'd always have a plate of cookies on the piano and a glass of milk or a pitcher of milk. And when the cookies ran out, then I'd run out. But at least she kept my interest up. And I think that's about all you can do with kids today. Bribe them. Because they really don't want to practice. And any way you can get them to practice, any way you can keep up their interest, whether it's buying them records or taking them to concerts or what have you, I think it's important. I was just reading the Arthur Rubinstein bio. He had the same experience. He had a great deal of talent, but he never wanted to practice. And it wasn't until he got to be 40 years old And he said, I suddenly realized that I was just kind of a hack pianist, and if I really wanted to do something, I had to work. So he started practicing, and believe me, it's the same old gag. How do you get to Carnegie Hall, the guy said. And he said, well, practice, man. And it's the truth, because I just haven't found an easy way. I had a relative in Sweden who was called Blind Tom, and he was blind. There's a big statue to him today in Sweden. Marvelous musician, played by ear, composed, anything that he heard he could play back. And I kind of inherited that very same gift, and I believe I got it from him. I really believe that talent is passed on, and the musical geniuses that I have seen, they just started right out and played. So I think it's a combination of the two. You've got to have the talent, but you just got the bricks. And if you don't build a house, you're dead.
Were your parents musically inclined at all?
My dad was a boxer before he went into the ministry. One of the worst musicians I ever met in my life. My mother, she was a very fine musician. She directed the orchestra in college and taught violin. One thing my parents did, they did take me to hear some of the great musicians. I remember particularly hearing Paderewski. And in those days, people were tremendously reserved in their applause. Now you get a standing ovation nearly every night if you really produce. But in those days, it was just polite applause at the end of a number. But people actually stood up and cheered and yelled bravo when Paderewski played. And I remember saying to myself, I was 11 years old at the time, I said, gee, could that ever happen to me? And all of a sudden, Lou Gehrig wasn't half as big to me or half as important to me.
Roger Williams has often said that making a living playing the piano is not all that easy.
When I went to Juilliard, I saw this big, beautiful school turn out like 300-400 musicians every year. And I mean, these people went to the finest music school in the world. There is not very much room. There are very few openings, and there are very few concert pianists, for instance, that can command any kind of money at all in the world today. Some tremendous talents that are practically starving to death. And it's a rough business. Unfortunately, or fortunately, any way you want to put it, I have seen what it really takes to make it and stay there, and I know the price I must pay. And my favorite saying is, take what you want out of life, but pay for it. Or in my case, take what you want out of life, but play for it.
You've proven that successful performing is most rewarding, Roger.
For those few minutes after I have cussed the piano, cussed the tuner, cussed myself, sweated through a sound test, been up all night to get there and done publicity before the concert, for those few minutes when I do sit at that piano and I do play my pain, when I play, I cry. I actually cry. A lot of people go in for therapy. A lot of boxers kill each other. Football players rush each other and knock each other around. I take it out on the piano. I think the great writers, the great artists, the great musicians are all playing, painting, or writing their pain. Those few minutes when I do that and get this out of me are great moments that I love. If I am pleased with what I do and I like my performance and I know that I have played well, I can be very happy if the audience doesn't react. But when they catch fire at the same time that I do, and we all feel it together, I'll tell you, I don't believe there's another experience like that in this world.
It's almost unthinkable to look back on it today, but Roger Williams' talents at the piano could have been short-circuited. During a course in gunnery, your hand was crushed by the breech of a gun. At first, it seemed like you might lose the hand, but the Navy surgeon at the base operated brilliantly and saved it. Tell us about it, Roger.
The gun that I was loading was a breech-loading gun, and you have to get the big shell with the palm of one hand and your left hand underneath the shell, your right hand palm in the back of the shell and shove it in the gun. Then the breech comes down. Then you fire the gun. Well, I shoved the shell in the gun, and the breech came down prematurely and smashed my fingers very badly. And it was a traumatic experience. I've had a couple of them in my life like that. And I wasn't sure for a while whether I'd ever play again. But I worked on it very hard. I used a lot of hand exercises. In fact, I invented a couple little things for helping the fingers that have helped a lot of people in the meantime. Little rubber band things that I worked out to really stretch out the fingers and regain use of my hand.
Truthfully, you have treated your most precious assets roughly over the years, haven't you?
I have injured my hands in more ways. I could do a whole show just on that. I hurt it doing lumberjack work. I hurt it during the Navy. I nearly lost a couple fingers in the Navy. I've hurt my hands boxing. I've really banged them up. And to this day, they won't give me insurance on my hands because they say I do too many things that are, could be injurious to them. Too great a risk, in other words.
You have said music is your life. Now, that may sound like a cliche, but you really mean it.
I just like music. I really can't say which I like the best. If it's performed well, I get a chill up and down my back. That's always an indication to me. When that old shiver goes up and down my back, I know I'm really digging whatever's being performed. I think very few musicians communicate. And communicating is getting to that guy's back and making him shiver when he hears you.
So many people in your audience have children of their own who want to play the piano, or if not that, parents who would like for them to play the piano, and yet you hear the same thing over and over again.
It's the same old thing, Wink, night after night after night. Why didn't my parents make me practice? And they all say the same thing. I can't give you a lot of rules. I don't know how hard you should beat down your kids to practice. One of my children showed a tremendous talent for music and an aptitude for it. I pushed her awfully hard. And I think the greatest compliment I ever had from her, she's a fine concert guitarist, and she says, Dad, she said, I have taken lessons now away from you for 5 or 6 years. And she said, those things that you taught me and those lessons and the discipline you taught me, she said, I have never found anywhere else. And she said, it has helped me more than anything else in my life. And I said, well, gosh, I said, Laura, I was awful tough on you. And she said, boy, that's where it's at.
I think I read this somewhere. Is it true? At one time, were you jealous of your fellow pianist, Peter Nero?
I think the best thing ever happened to me was Peter Nero, because he made me work. And when things are too easy and you're too lackadaisical, you don't advance. I'm all for competition. I don't care if it's in radio stations or in piano and making cars and everything else. And once we take away the competition, we start down. I think life is a struggle from the minute you're born until you die. And the minute you quit struggling, you start dying.
Roger, in closing, one more thought. You make playing a piano look like we could all do it.
Now that's a trick when you get out before an audience. You got to act like just nothing to it. You're enjoying every minute, and you have to be enjoying every minute. And if your technique isn't up, in other words, if you haven't practiced, it's hard to play those very difficult songs. But if your technique is up and you've been working hard, just breeze through them.